Alan Wake is one of my favorite games ever made. I didn't play it when the game came out, but once I did, I fell in love with the game. Remedy has become one of my favorite game developers ever made, and I love all of their games. And Alan Wake is the game that started it all, and one of the games that has stayed with me the most. Whether it be the story, or the soundtrack, or the characters, I always find myself thinking of Alan Wake, and wanting to come back to Bright Falls.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer.
So I feel like the graphics have They've aged pretty well, in my opinion, whether it be the original 360 version or the remastered version. However, the mouth movements can look kind of weird, like they have not aged well. However, while the faces and mouths can be a little weird at times, the locations and setting of this game is beautiful. Bright Falls is in the Pacific Northwest in the state of Washington, and it is so beautiful. Whether you are in town or in the woods, this game is beautiful. Whether it be during the day or night, the moonlight shining through the trees. If a game like Slender the Arrival makes me terrified of being in the woods, a game like Alan Wake makes me want to move to a small town in the woods like Bright Falls. Which does bring up the question, is Alan Wake a horror game? In my opinion, it is not a horror game, but it has horror elements to it. Which, yeah, I can understand some people not liking, since this game does very much play with, some horror tropes, and therefore expecting it to be scary. But, unlike Alan Wake 2, this game isn't scary at all, in my opinion. Even when the Taken surprise attack you, the game lets you know where they are, and there's normally time for you to react, so, there's time for you to react and to take them down.
Wake up. Shh, baby. Just another nightmare. Everything's fine. You dozed off.
Right. Anything more than dozed off would be news for everyone.
Cheer up, handsome. We're here.
So Alan wakes up in his car with his wife Alice while they are pulling into the town of Bright Falls, and Alice wants Alan to take a picture with the local radio host Pat Maine, who, even though Alan doesn't want to be bothered or recognized, Pat Maine recognizes him immediately. We then enter the Oh Dear Diner, and we meet a fangirl named Rose, a park ranger named Rusty, Cynthia Weaver, a crazy lady with a lamp, and the two best characters in this game, the Anderson brothers, Tor and Odin.
Do me a favor, Sonny. I could really use a tune right now. Coconut, number 6 in the jukebox. I'd do it myself, but both of my legs have gone to sleep. Bad circulation. Yeah.
Are you serious? Coconut again? You disgust me. Call yourself a rocker. Unbelievable. Ha!
It does that. Get stuck. Yeah, you need to give it a good solid whack. Now that's what I'm talking about, yes!
This is it. I've died and gone to hell.
Something I love about this game is Bright Falls feels like the town doesn't just feel like a setting for you to play or to be in. It feels like a real living, breathing town. The people are funny, and they have their own thoughts and feelings. They have their own side stories and lives going on, rather than just Alan's. Pat Maine, the radio host we met earlier, he would talk about how he met a famous person on his radio show, only for Rose to call in and tell everybody that the famous person was Alan Wake himself. You can also listen to a guy telling Pat that his dog ran away, only for Rusty, the park ranger, to find him in episode 2, or this moment when you're running away from the cops in episode 3.
Nightingale, over. What on earth is going on? My deputies tell me you fired at Wake and he didn't have a gun. You almost hit a civilian instead. Over.
The town of Bright Falls feels alive and breathing, and the whole time you're playing the game, it feels like there's other things going on than just what Alan is going through.
It's a real nut house.
Can you believe this place?
This would make a wonderful setting for a book.
We're supposed to be on vacation, Alice. I'll figure it out when we get back home. Okay?
Okay, we can talk about this later.
Batman here on KBFF.
I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to bury my head in sand.
Here's another one of my favorites to go with it.
Once upon a time, I was a successful writer, but that was a long time ago. I hadn't been able to write a word in 2 years, not since my last book.
And now the weather.
So Alan gets to the location of the cabin on Cauldron Lake from a woman in black, and he and Alice head over there to start their vacation. You can already see that Alan is starting to think about a love story he could write, and there's a sign that he might be able to stop his writer's block that is very much the core of this game. However, Alice has a gift for him upstairs.
I have a surprise for you.
Well, hello there.
I'm not the surprise. It's in the study. Go take a look.
Okay.
Surprise!
Alice? What is this?
I guess I have a small confession to make. I thought maybe you could write here that a change of scenery would get you past...
Damn it, Alice, everyone
Hey,
keeps...
hey, just hear me out. There's a local doctor, Dr. Hartman. I read a book of his. He has a private clinic here. He specializes in helping artists. Maybe...
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that. That's not... Alan? Alan?
Just don't! I don't want to hear it! God damn it, Alice! God damn it! I knew...
I have never liked what Alice does here with surprising Alan with the typewriter. She would know probably more than anybody how stressed he has been not being able to write anything since his last book, The Sudden Stop, was released, and how he has just wanted... Alan wanted nothing but a relaxing vacation away from everyone, only to give him a typewriter to remind him that for 2 entire whole years, he hasn't been able to write anything. However, after Alan storms out, Alice is taken by the dark presence and by Cauldron Lake, and suddenly Alan wakes up in a car that has crashed, and after crawling out, he has to make his way to the nearby gas station that is owned by Carl Stuckey, who was originally the person Alan was supposed to get the keys from, but he showed up late. So, Alan makes his way there, and something to mention is that probably 90% of this game is set in the woods of the Pacific Northwest, which can get kind of tiring, but the light physics in this game honestly make them great. Like, to wander around with the moonlight cutting through the trees, and the Taken, who are the main enemies you will fight throughout the game, hiding in the shadows, only to come out and try and strike Alan. Alan makes his way through the woods, and he finds Carl Stuckey, the guy that he was supposed to get the keys from, but he doesn't seem okay.
Phil!
There's been an accident! I need help! Listen, I need to...
Premium cabins for rent in...
Oh, hell.
Carl Stuckey.
Pleased
To meet you. Non-refundable
reservation
deposit required. Fair and square.
This is the kind of stuff you put up with living in a remote little mountain town. At least we don't have to deal with traffic.
So, Carl has been taken, and after running away, you find a gun and a flashlight, which I should mention there was a tutorial section before this, but I honestly... I find the tutorial section at the beginning of this game kind of pointless, honestly. But after moving through the woods, you finally reach Carl, and you have to take him out, and then go to the gas station to call for help.
He spat on the garage floor and tried to shake the cobwebs from his head. Ever since the couple never showed to pick up the keys, things had been fuzzy. A feeling caught his attention. Stuckey looked up and stared as his brain tried in vain to process the horror before him. He stumbled back, knocking over a can of oil. A black pool spread across the floor while he struggled for a brief moment, then let go as the unrelenting darkness engulfed him. Oh, thank God, Sheriff.
Sheriff Sarah Breaker, you are...
I'm Alan Wake, but listen, I was in a car crash. My wife, Alice, she's missing.
Calm down, Mr. Wade.
We were staying in a cabin on the island, on Cauldron Lake.
There's no island on Cauldron Lake, not since the big eruption in the 70s.
Please, I can take you there, okay?
You look like you've taken a pretty bad knock to the head. Are you okay?
Listen.
We'll figure this out. Please get in the car. We'll swing by the lake and then we'll go to the station, okay? Mr. Wake, have you seen Stucky, the guy who owns this place?
I realized I couldn't tell her what had happened in the forest. She wouldn't have believed me. And then she wouldn't have helped me with Alice.
We flash back to 3 years ago to New York City. And we see Alan Wake in his apartment. And he's just looking awful without his beard. Like, I don't know why people go babyface, but that's off topic. Alice is working on photos for Alan's next book. However, after the power goes out, Alan and Alice sit down on the couch. And Alan tells her the story his mother used to tell him when he was little about the clicker, which helped him not be afraid of the dark. We return to modern day, and Alan is getting checked out by the local doctor, who says he seems to be okay, and Alan goes and meets with Sheriff Sarah Baker, who is very suspicious of Alan because he claims he was living in a cabin that hasn't been there for years, and that his wife was taken in said cabin. He gets a phone call, and after heading outside, finds Alice's driver's license and is told to come meet him at Lover's Peak. Alan then heads back inside to talk to Sarah, and he runs into Dr. Emil Hartman, the man that Alice was telling him about.
Are you feeling any better, Mr. Wake?
I'd like to leave. Am I free to go?
Well, we still need to talk about...
Am I under arrest?
No, of course not. But I need to know where you'll be staying so I can get in touch with you.
I'd avoid the motel. The Majestic is known for its roaches. The cabins at Elderwood are pretty nice, though.
That sounds perfect.
I'm Dr. Emil Hartman. I'd like to invite you to stay at Cauldron Lake Lodge.
Did you talk to my wife?
I had the pleasure of discussing your situation with her on several occasions.
Did you set something up with her?
I invited her here. My clinic is a place where...
Oh!
Hey!
Oh, my!
Take it easy.
Hey, nobody move. Get your hands off of my client.
Who are you?
I'm Barry Wheeler, his agent. If you have business with Mr. Wake, you talk to me. You yokels won't know what hit you once I sick my lawyers on your asses.
No harm done, Sarah. I'm all right. I don't want to press charges. Mr. Wake, my offer still stands.
Get me out of here.
Alan doesn't take meeting Hartman well, but Alan and now his best friend and his agent, Barry Wheeler, go to find Rusty in order to get a cabin to rent. Alan goes and makes his way to the kidnapper, but he sees the visitor center is destroyed and comes across the park ranger Rusty, who you have to fight, and he moves very quickly. But you take him down.
In that last instant of consciousness, Rusty thought about Rose. He was older than she was. Rose was barely out of her teens. But she made him feel young and forget what a train wreck his long-dead marriage had been. He still wore the ring. He'd been waiting for her to tell him to take it off. Now she never would.
And Alan continues to kidnap her. As he does, I want to talk about, in my opinion, the best pieces of collectibles in any video game ever, and that being the manuscript pages. So throughout the game, Alan can find manuscript pages of a book that he apparently wrote. However, Alan doesn't remember writing anything at all. In fact, he hasn't been able to write anything for 2 years, ever since he finished his last book, The Sudden Stop, in which he kills his main character, Alex Casey, which many people at the time theorized was Max Payne, but that's I feel like now it's kind of like disproven, but also kind of proven. I don't really know. These manuscripts not only help with world building, but they also tell you events that are coming up. And while you could say that this could ruin moments in games, in the game coming up, I don't agree. Actually, it's the opposite. Where they actually add tension. Once the moment actually does arrive, like earlier, you can find a manuscript describing Alan walking into the visitor center and seeing Rusty hurt, raising the tension before the scene happens. It also helps building the world of Bright Falls and gives more depth to these characters who, honestly, they don't have a lot of screen time. Like, you can learn that both Rose, the waitress, and Rusty loved each other and had a crush on each other, but both of them never did anything about it.
Rose knew that Rusty was in love with her, and she liked him too. She liked him a lot. He taught her to dance, and life had certainly taught her the value of a man who was gentle. He treated her well, made her smile, made her feel good. But Rusty wasn't the prince of her dreams, and that tended to underline the unbearable truth. She was no closer to that Hollywood magic than he was.
You get introduced to Agent Nightingale and how much he hates Bright Falls before he even shows up on screen. I always want to go out of my way to try and get as many as possible because they're all so interesting to listen to. Alan finds the kidnapper, and now you have to follow him with only a flashlight while he is very poorly shooting the Taken and misses a lot. And eventually you make it to Lover's Peak, and he tells Alan he wants the manuscript, and then he'll give back Alice. But Alan punches him, and he decides to run away. Alan makes his way back to Barry, where crows are attacking the cabin, and after you defeat them, Alan starts working on trying to write something for the kidnapper to have, but his writer's block gets in the way, causing him to not be able to write a single word. But Alan is in luck because Rose is calling to help.
Barry Wheeler speaking.
This is Rose.
Rose?
I found Mr. Wake's pages.
Oh, you sweet, brilliant girl.
Could you and Mr. Wake come get them? I live in the trailer park outside the town.
We'll be there in less than an hour.
Bye now.
See you soon.
Have a great day. Hope you come back soon. Welcome to the Oh Dear
Diner.
Good girl.
Alan and Barry arrive at Rose's house, however she ends up drugging them, and Alan passes out and awakens a few hours later with it being pitch black outside, but Barry hasn't woken up yet, and the effect of Rose being possessed is shown. It is really sad looking at her, like how she is now compared to how she was at the beginning of the game. But as we leave, we have one of the best intros for a character ever.
Oh, you're gonna get it now. God knows what you've done to that poor girl.
This is Agent Nightingale, FBI! Get him up, Hemingway! You're under arrest! You move a muscle, I'll unload right in your goddamn face! Stay right where you are, Spillane!
What are? I'm standing right here, you goddamn maniac!
Agent Nightingale is probably one of my favorite characters in this game because of this intro and him calling Alan the name of other authors and writers. Alan has to run through the woods to get to Pat Maine, and for a while you don't even have a weapon, and instead are introduced to flash grenades. But as you make your way to the radio station, you hear the police be taken by the Dark Peasants, which I do think is one of the most horrifying things in this game that I don't view as a horror game. So Alan makes his way to Pat Maine and is almost shot by Nightingale, and now has to make his way to the coal mine because that is where he's supposed to meet the kidnapper.
Nightingale stared through the broken studio window into the dark woods. He turned around, started to walk out, but Maine grabbed his arm. "Young man, you almost shot me. You don't shoot off rounds at people like that. What's the matter with you?" Nightingale shook his arm free, marched out. His cheeks burned with rage and humiliation.
As he's making his way there, I want to talk about the gameplay because this is actually the longest part of this game. I love the gameplay of this game, however, I can understand if people don't like it or even find it to be boring. In order to fight the Taken, you have to shine your flashlight on them for a couple of seconds, and depending on the size of them, it will take longer or shorter, and then you can take them down with a couple shots. You have two main weapons, with your first one being a revolver, which you can't swap out. You will always have. However, the other will either be a shotgun or a hunting rifle, in which you can decide which gun you want, and these do more damage than the revolver and are more helpful against the bigger foes, and the smaller taken you can take out in like one shot with a shotgun or a hunting rifle. However, you also get a flare gun, which is absolutely my favorite weapon in this game. I know everyone loves flash grenades, and I do as well because it's the easiest way to kill loads of taken, and the lighting effects just look amazing when they go off. However, Alan can overthrow them sometimes, but I love the flare gun the most, being the flare gun the most being of the red light and the flare. When you fire it, after a few seconds it explodes, taking out any taken nearby, and it can take out ambushes very quickly. I just love this weapon. The Dark Presence and the Taken, I think, are great enemies, with them being able to hide in the darkness of the woods and can ambush you a lot, and it's easy to be overwhelmed by them. Unlike other horror game enemies, they don't growl, they don't scream, they don't do what you normally expect. They say normal everyday things. When you come across the police after they are taken, they say, and other things that would be normal everyday things that they would have said anyways, but now they feel unnerving, but not scary. I mentioned before that I do not think this game is scary, or even a horror game, but it's horror themed in my mind. The story Alan even wrote is supposed to be a horror story. Alan even compares what he's doing, what is going on to him, with a Stephen King novel, and the characters are afraid about what's going on, but the player isn't, which I do think will make many people not like this game. I feel like many people expect this game to be a scary and horror because of the tone and everything is building on, but very rarely will you jump in your seat while playing, and it does break immersion, which I personally don't like saying, because I feel like most people use that term the wrong way and mostly say it, and they will say it and then say something feels video gamey while they're playing a video game. Like, of course it feels that way, but immersion is very important, especially with horror games. However, Alan Wake feels like you should be scared, and there are moments that should shock and surprise you, but they don't. And I don't think it's overall a bad thing. But I can see it make some people not like this game because of this. Also, with how long episode 3 is, I think it shows the problem with the gameplay, that during long moments, it does get kind of tiring. Now, this isn't really a problem with me because I absolutely love this game and I've replayed it a lot, but it's definitely a problem with the game.
Without warning, the headache stabbed at my brain. Alice?
This moment in the cave when you hear Alice calling for Alan is optional. You do not have to follow the voice. But you always should, in my opinion, because Alan always would, in my mind. I don't think Alan would ever ignore his wife's voice, no matter what. And while I just went off about how this game isn't scary and how this might ruin it for some people, I think this is one of the best horror moments in this game that I do remember actually making me jump when I first encountered it. Something that is mentioned to us in this episode that I haven't talked about is that at the end of Chapter 2, Barry goes to the Bright Falls Library and finds information on Thomas Zane, a poet from the 70s who came here with his girlfriend Barbara Jagger. We find out that the lady in black that we have seen throughout the game and who gave us the keys at the beginning is Barbara, who was taken by the Dark Presence. However, they were both erased from history, so Barry couldn't really find anything about Thomas Zane. Did you know that this game was originally supposed to be an open world game, Well, at least I believe it was, because when this game was being made, Remedy was owned by Microsoft, and they wanted Remedy to make an open world game like Assassin's Creed or GTA. And, Sam Lake, the creator, he found this frustrating because things wouldn't work until they made the game smaller. However, the open world elements are still there and can be felt, and I believe that's part of the reason Bright Falls feels so alive. However, I prefer it not being an open world. I think it works better with how it is now, and I think it wouldn't work as well if during the day we could explore all over the place and not have any threats until nighttime. I also like that this game isn't an open world because the driving is so terrible. It makes you think Alan doesn't know how to drive, but he is also from New York, and you don't have to drive that much in that city.
I didn't want to go outside. Cops had to be looking for me. The noon sun turned the place into a sauna. The day dragged on. Different scenarios ran through my mind. Ways of how I'd torture the kidnapper to get Alice back. Or the different horrible things he could have done to her. I imagined her dead. I had no way of knowing she was still alive. It was killing me. I was running on blind hope. It was all a waste of time. The bastard never showed up.
So the kidnapper doesn't show up, and now we have to go to Mirror Peak, where we will find the kidnapper. And while I love the story of this game, and honestly everything about this game, I do not understand this plot point.
The boss didn't know who he was messing with. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. We don't have his wife. We don't know where she is. She's probably drowned. We just said we had her to make him play ball. You see? To get him writing for us.
So the kidnapper, who we find out his name is Mott because of a manuscript, he telling Alan that he kidnapped Alice so he can get Alan's manuscript pages works in my mind, because it's obvious he knows the power that Alan's writing has and that the lake has, and it's not just Mott, but his boss, who we find out is Dr. Emil Hartman. He wants them. It makes sense he wants them, as well as telling us that Dr. Hartman knows about the power of the lake. So that works and makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is, why did the Dark Presence think that Mott had Alice? I feel like it would know that he is lying and that she is instead in the lake, yet for some reason thinks the kidnapper has her. I guess you could say because the story is making it do it and just think that, but I don't know. Truthfully, I have no clue. I always thought there was a weird story moment.
Alan, shh, baby. It was just a nightmare.
Alice.
There you go, Alan.
Hartman, I fell.
I had to give you a sedative. Don't fight it. You went through another rough period.
What?
Right now, it's very important that you stay calm. We don't want you to have another episode. You're a patient at my clinic. Have been for a while now. The shock of your wife's death triggered a mental illness.
No, you lie.
You're suffering from various symptoms of undifferentiated schizophrenia.
Bastard.
It's okay, Alan. Just let go.
Alan wakes up in Dr. Hartman's lodge. This entire episode is the absolute best part of this game. Hartman tries to convince Alan that everything we have gone through in this game was all a dream and hallucination from finding out Alice died. However, there are clues to let us know Hartman is lying, because he is wearing a bandage where Alan punched him earlier, the pages in your room are blank, and more importantly, the Anderson brothers remember you.
Turn to your room and try to write. It really is for the best. Don't you think?
I'd like to bash his head in with a hammer.
Oh, he'd love to fish out our secrets, but he has no clue. He's not crazy enough. Not crazy like us, Sonny.
Yeah!
Being crazy's a requirement, Sonny. Who else could understand the world when it's like this? It takes crazy to know crazy.
That's the sanest thing I've heard in a while.
Zane! You're all right, Tom. Hey, we like him, don't we, bro? He's got to go to the farm.
The Anderson Farm. Valhalla!
We wrote it all down, lest we'd forget. A crash course. All you need to know to get your head right. You need to find the message.
Here, Sonny, here's something for you. Gave me a rash, but I kept it safe from these bastards.
So Alan returns to his room and tries to write, but can't think of anything. And after Tor and Odin causes a commotion, Alan uses it to escape and makes his way to Hartman's office. And I love this picture you walk past on your way there. It's supposed to show that, Hartman not only knew the kidnapper, but he also worked for Hartman. However, it's framed, and it looks like nobody wanted to be a part of the picture, so they just stood wherever, and it always makes me laugh. Anyway, after finding Barry and Alan, and the Alan Wake cutout from the diner, we enter Hartman's office.
Alan, please. You're sliding back into the...
Tell me one more lie, and I'll shoot you in the face.
Ah, well, it was worth a shot. Really, Wake, come on. Let's work together on this. You have no idea...
Hartman, shut up! Barry, get out of here. I'll catch up with you. Get a car.
Oh, Al, let's just...
Go!
Wake, listen to me. This is a mistake. Don't you see? Together we can create something absolutely wonderful.
I slammed the door shut right in his smug face. He pleaded for me to open the door. True to form, the asshole actually thought I would obey. I had no sympathy left, no guilt either, not for him. I took a moment to savor the scream. I bet I had a smile on my face. It was all that I had time for. The dark presence was inside the lodge with me.
So, by this point, I feel like most people would bring up that Alan isn't a nice dude, or say that he is a bad person, and therefore we shouldn't like him. However, that's why I like him. And I'm tired of, the morality police coming and trying to tell me what characters I can and cannot like. Alan is an asshole. Yes, he is. He has a temper. He blows up on people. He yells at his wife who just wanted to help. He calls Rose an airhead at the beginning of episode 2 just because she's a fan of his. However, because of all of this, Alan is a great character. And he feels human and feels like a real person. He doesn't just feel like a character in a video game or even as someone we just take control of. He feels like a real person who has his own problems and issues that he has to work throughout the story. Barry being with us throughout certain parts of the game helps because he calls Alan out for the way he acts because he knows Alan. In fact, one of the best moments in this game is in this chapter of Barry mocking Alan with the cutout later on.
Hey, I think Alan Wake here has something to say. What's that, Al?
Ooh, I'm Alan Wake. I'm always right about everything. And if I don't get my way, I'll sulk all day long. I'm always intense and moody. It makes me very attractive and mysterious. Right now, I'm just standing here because I need my best friend Barry to carry me. But that's okay. I can just take him for granted.
I think I see what you did there.
Alan is supposed to be a character that is troubled, it has issues, but throughout it all, you still care about him. You want him to succeed because that is how it is in real life. None of us are perfect. And while the morality police like to come out and say that a character or even a person is or isn't a good person, they themselves are normally never good people themselves. Everyone has a bad part about them, even the people you care about, and you learn to deal with it and accept the bad parts of people. And it's the same case with Alan Wake.
We make it? I don't care what anybody says, I'm done with darkness. You're gonna buy me a tanning bed as a gift, and I'm gonna live in it!
I'm crazy, but that's fine, Barry.
Oh, you got that right, Al. You're barking mad. You are by far the craziest...
But maybe that's inevitable when you deal with crazy stuff like this. It helps.
this is happening, Barry. Alice, they never had Alice. She's trapped in the darkness at the bottom of the lake, but she's not dead.
Al, how can you know that?
I know, Barry. I can...
Al,
No, listen. I can bring her back. I can find her. There's something special about this place. The lake, it does something to the works of art created here. It makes them come true. But there's a catch. The dark presence, whatever that thing is, twists it to its own ends. That's why all of this is happening. It's using my manuscript to take over everything.
Al, I believe you.
It happened to Thomas Zane before, it happened to the Andersons.
I believe you. Crazy or not, you're not delusional. Weird shit's going down. That's a fact. I'm on board, man. I'm with you.
The Andersons knew about it, but they were too far gone to tell me with all the drugs they were on. But they wrote it down. There's a message somewhere at their farm, Barry. We just need to find it.
Look out! God damn it, Al! Talk to me!
I had lost my gun in the crash. Barry was nowhere to be seen.
Alan is separated from Barry and makes his way to the Anderson farm, where after you arrive, you have the best part of the game, where you have to fight off Taken while heavy metal plays, and as a metalhead, this is how I want to die. Which, this is the perfect time to talk about the music in this game, which I absolutely love, whether it be the original soundtrack or the songs that the real-life Finnish band Poets of the Fall wrote for this game. This song, wrote for this game, and the band Old Gods of Asgard is basically the in-game version of Poets of the Fall. Now, Children of the Elder God isn't my favorite Old Gods of Asgard song. Honestly, it's probably my least favorite, with my favorite either being Take Control from Control, Ocean Summoning from Alan Wake 2, or Poets and His Muse. That is in this game that plays later on in this episode. Poets of the Fall also released their song War in this game, which is my favorite song by them and can be found at the last radio you find from Pat Main. And I always just stand there listening to the whole song when I get there. It's just so good. However, it's not just the songs Poets of the Fall wrote, but also the soundtrack to this game as well is great. I love just listening to this soundtrack, whether I'm driving somewhere or even when I'm at work. I just love it. Alan continues to the Anderson farm and recreates that one scene from Cars with the tractor chasing after them. And afterwards, him and Barry arrive and receive the message from the Anderson brothers song Poet and His Muse, telling them they need to find Cynthia Weaver, the lamp lady from the beginning of the game. And Alan and Barry get drunk, where Alan talks about how he could write 10 books if he wanted, to remind us that at the core throughout this entire game, writer's block is a big part of Alan's character. He passes out and he remembers everything that happened to him in the week that he was missing and how Thomas Zane came and saved him.
You can write her back. The story will come true and all will be well again.
She had Alice, and the manuscript was the ransom for her. Yes. All right. I'll fix it. I'll bring her back. No. I wrote it. I remembered it all now. In the dark, I'd written for days, a week, almost a complete manuscript of a novel entitled Departure. Jagger had been my editor, whispering in my ear, making sure that the unfolding story would make her more and more powerful. I thought I was saving Alice. Even with the cobwebs she put in my head, some part of me had been aware enough to write my escape into the story, to bring a light into the cabin to release me before I could finish, to interrupt the horror story before the ending, where darkness consumed everything and everyone. Zane was weak and far away, but I had written him into the story, and his light had been enough to set me free.
It isn't here now. I'm here because it was written. I brought the light to set you free. You must hurry. It will know I'm here. It will be back soon. It stole the skin of my Barbara a long time ago. She looks so old.
I had woken up, confused and groggy, my mind consumed by darkness and fear. All I could do was to escape. The week spent in the cabin had taken its toll. I was barely conscious and fading fast. It had to have cost Zane terribly, thrown him even deeper into whatever dark place he now haunted. But he had managed to weaken the dark presence, kept me safe that night.
I wrote it. It's my fault.
That's right, James Joyce. It's your fault, and you're gonna pay for it.
Alan and Barry are now in prison, and Alan says he needs to get out and reach Cynthia Weaver, only for Agent Nightingale to come in yelling at Alan. However, he is eventually taken by the Dark Presence. We now have to fight our way throughout Bright Falls, and it's so great after fighting in the woods for so long that we are now fighting throughout the town. The Dark Presence no longer caring about hiding. I love this section, and town feels more alive, with Sarah complaining about how she will give the town priest a talking to for not fixing the lock on his door, or the doctor from the start of episode 2 yelling out his window about the gunshots.
We can make it through the bookstore. Wheeler should be waiting for us in the backyard.
Keep the hell down or I'll call the sheriff.
Oh, hi, Doc. I've got it. Don't worry about it.
Sarah, about time somebody showed up. All this shooting in the air is idiotic. One of these days they'll kill somebody. And over Deerfest.
I know. Go back to bed.
My one problem with this section is that you're fighting throughout Bright Falls with Sheriff Sarah Baker, and she doesn't say anything about it. You know, what you are fighting, they aren't monsters. They aren't creatures. The Taken are literally just people who are possessed by the Dark Presence, and Sarah should recognize some of the people who are now taken. I just wish there was a line of dialogue where, Sarah mentioned that she is killing people who she knows, former police officers who served under her, normal townsfolk who lived in her town, but she doesn't. I guess you could say just, because Bright Falls is a tourist town, she doesn't know them. But, people still live in the town of Bright Falls. Either way, you fight your way to the helipad and have to defend your position while waiting for Sarah to start the helicopter, and once it's ready, you get on.
Wake, you better put an end to this.
Just get me to Weaver, Sheriff.
You're taking a big chance on a local crazy lady, Al. I hope you're right about her, or we can kiss this town goodbye.
I guess you New Yorkers are used to rough situations like this.
Right. The city's a war zone. King Kong, mutant alligators, and Alex Casey shoots the place up every weekend. Look, I never even carried a gun until a couple of days ago.
Well, my dad used to be a cop there. Tells some pretty wild stories.
Stuff like this?
No, just normal bad stuff. Kinda like your books, Wake. I used to tease Dad that he was just like Alex Casey.
You've read me.
Oh, sure. You're a pretty good writer. A little heavy on the metaphors, maybe.
Nobody's ever said that before.
We're coming up on the power plant. See the lit building over there? And that's the dam further up the river. I can't land here. I'll take her down the road across the river.
Just get me there, Sheriff.
Hold on! Ow!
Son of a bitch!
So, because Alan fell out of the helicopter, he lost all of his weapons, so everything you had while defending your position is gone, which is annoying. But you start heading to the power plant, and this is where the radio that plays War is, and you can make your way there and finally find Cynthia Weaver.
Come, the pipe's empty now. We're ready to go. This way. We need to go. I knew them both, Tom and Barbara. I had such a crush on him. Such a beautiful man. I was jealous. There was a part of me that was maybe a little glad when she had the accident. And then Tom started writing and woke the darkness up. He tried to bring her back, but you can't do that. There are no free rides like that.
I'm starting to realize that.
In that case, young man, perhaps you're a smarter man than Tom was. The witch looked like her, but it wasn't. Barbara was sweet. He didn't understand until it was too late. He tried to undo it, wrote himself, her, everything he'd ever written out of the world. Oh, he was so famous. And afterward, no one knew. Oh, Tom. He left only one thing behind in my care, in case it happened again. Insurance. He trusted me. Or perhaps used me a little. Tom knew how I felt. Knew I wouldn't refuse him. I built the well-lit room and I put it there. It's been waiting for you. We are characters trapped in a story you have written, and none of us will survive to see the end of it if the darkness isn't stopped. She'll twist the story to her own dark ends.
How do you know all this?
Tom, that's the way he wrote it. He still talks to me, you know, in television, from beyond, from below. We have both been touched by the darkness, young man. He saved us both with light, but the darkness stays with you. Leaves a stain.
On the way to the well-lit room, Alan calls Barry in his helicopter crash, and he is so close to answers, but decides to go back for Barry and Sarah. After finding them, you have to make your way up to the dam and run to the elevator, and I have no clue how Alan survives getting impaled like this.
And I won't need to worry about the room anymore, because 6 and 33 and 118 need changing soon, and I don't want to climb up the ladder to change them because it's very late, and I'm tired. And if you take it, I won't have to do that anymore.
The page was autobiographical, a memory from my childhood. But I didn't write this. It was a page written by Thomas Zane. None of them were supposed to exist anymore.
Alan, 7 years old, would fight sleep to the bitter end. When he did sleep, he soon woke up, screaming, the nightmares fresh in his mind. One evening, his mother, sitting by his bed, offered him an old light switch. She called it the clicker, and flicking the switch would turn on a magical light that would drive the beast away. To imbue the talisman with all possible power, she added that it had been given to her by Alan's father. Alan never knew him, and anything of his took on mythical proportions in his mind. With the clicker firmly in his hand, Alan finally slept like a baby. Now, almost 30 years later, Alan thought of this as he stood on the rim of Cauldron Lake, the clicker in his hand. He took a deep breath and jumped.
My mind swirled. I'd given the clicker to Alice, yet it was here. Zane had written it into existence, in a story I had written. I can get to her now. I can finish this.
This page written by Thomas Zane is very confusing, because is it saying that Thomas Zane created Alan. Maybe he had visions of Alan in the 70s before he disappeared. Honestly, I have no clue, and I don't think anybody else in the fan base does. We then wake up 2 years earlier. Alan is hungover, and after finding a pair of sunglasses, you see the late night interview he did the night before. Alice comes in and they talk about how once the tour is done, they should go back, they should go on vacation, only for it to cut back to present time.
The clicker was the key to the cabin. I had to return to Cauldron Lake to save Alice. I'm going back to the lake to finish this. I'm going to write an ending to the story in the manuscript on my own terms, to make it all right.
Why can't you just write it here?
The last page is still in the typewriter. I need to read it first. Everything needs to be just right. Zane tried to cut some corners, and it didn't end well.
Okay, ready when you are.
I'm sorry, Sarah, but I need to do this alone. Barry, take her gun. Miss Weaver, close the door when I leave.
Good luck, Al.
See you later. When I got out, it was warm and sunny. I'd flicked the switch of the clicker. Had it done this? I didn't stop to question it. I had to take advantage of the sunlight to get to the lake. On Zane's page, I'd stood on the rim of Cauldron Lake, about to use the clicker. That's where I was headed. Alone, in daylight, surrounded by the beauty of the Pacific Northwest landscape. It was hard not to let doubt creep in one last time. I could still chalk everything up to a dream, a delusion. I had enough imagination to make up something like this, having been in the cabin all this time, trapped in a story inside my head, gone mad from grief over Alice's death like Hartman had claimed. There would be no way of knowing. I told myself it didn't really matter. My course was set.
Alan has to make his way to Cauldron Lake, and this entire chapter is literally just nothing but a gauntlet of enemies while you make your way back to Cauldron Lake. The Dark Presence throwing everything it has at you. Taken, birds, throwing possessed objects at you, which is an enemy type, like, the Poltergeist is an enemy type I have not really talked about in this game. It's pretty self-explanatory. It possesses objects and throws it at you. It's pretty self-explanatory. Alan gets to this tornado that basically haunted him throughout the entire game, and kills it by firing a flare gun into the heart of it, and then jumps into the lake. And after everything Alan fought throughout the game, and this chapter, and everything the Dark Presence has done to Alan, what is the last thing the Dark Presence does to try and stop Alan?
Shh, baby. You were having a bad dream. It was just another nightmare.
No.
Everything's fine. You're home.
It wasn't a dream.
Everything's
fine. Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on!
It tries to seduce him. It tries to seduce him by pretending to be Alice, but saying that Alan is afraid of the dark when it's actually Alice's fear. After firing the clicker, Alan meets Mr. Scratch, and I wish there was more done with this version of Mr. Scratch, because this isn't the same Scratch that is in Alan Wake 2. While I do really like that version of Scratch, I just wish we got more out of this one that was introduced in this game, but we only see this version of Scratch in American Nightmare, which I don't like. American Nightmare. American Nightmare is not good. Alan makes his way to the cabin, and the Dark Presence tries to stop him by pretending to be Alice, saying that Alan abused her. However, it isn't true. And in fact, you can actually find an audio tape in the Cauldron Lake Lodge where Alice actually wishes Alan would hit her, because then he wouldn't be able to storm out and walk away from an argument.
now you will never get her back. I am much older than you. Older than your first work of art. I will find a new face to wear. Someone else to dream me free.
I could feel Alice's presence close by. I understood what I had to do now. I knew how to write the ending to Departure. There's light and there's darkness. Cause and effect. There's guilt and there's atonement. But the scales always need to balance. Everything has a price. That's where Zane had gone wrong. There's a long journey through the night back into the light.
And that was Alan Wake. It's one of my favorite games ever made. And I love this game. It's not a horror game in my mind. But everything else about this game makes up for that. And I just love it so much. And it's a game I always find myself coming back to. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I will see you all in the next video.
A wife yet?
My men are already on it.
Hands off of my client.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.